Morning, Alex.
Morning.
What do we have going on today?
So today we have some...
Central Coast vegetable growers are some of the most regulated agricultural operations in the United States. Every day when a grower handles or applies any type of pesticide, they take into account all the regulations created to govern those activities and ensure compliance with those regulations. New water quality regulations being considered over the next 2 years will have a dramatic impact on how vegetables and strawberries are grown on the Central Coast in the future.
In particular, the practices used on farms where pesticides are applied. Everyone involved in a farming operation must continue to be vigilant in fulfilling their responsibility to comply with these rules. The best place to start is the pesticide label. More on that in a minute.
This year, the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board is considering new regulations to address documented water quality problems with pesticides in the region's drains, streams, and creeks. As part of its mandate, the Regional Water Board regulates farms, cities, factories, and industries such as oil production. This state agency is responsible for ensuring that the region's waterways are protected.
When it comes to pesticides and waterways, those protections focus on the most sensitive aquatic organisms. These tiny, almost microscopic sized insects live in the water or stream bed silt. Because the waterway is the insect's habitat, the Water Board calls this a beneficial use that warrants protection. At high enough levels, pesticides can impact aquatic organisms, triggering actions by the Regional Water Board.
I think what we're trying to do is to protect beneficial uses. And so we may have a significant improvement in water quality that may not go far enough to protect a beneficial use. And so I think that that's really what the Water Board's goal is and what its charge is under the Water Code. Now, we can have the discussion all day long about whether some of these beneficial uses are actual, theoretical, and what should happen to them, but they are there. And I think that has to be what our goal is.
Since the Water Board began regulating Central Coast agriculture 15 years ago, the agency has overseen collection of samples from more than 50 waterways throughout the farming region, from Watsonville in the north to Santa Barbara in the south. Multiple detections of pesticides over the last 15 years has led the Regional Water Board to propose new, more restrictive rules in an attempt to ensure future detections meet state and federal requirements.
Over the next 2 years, as these proposed rules are debated, farmers and agricultural organizations will try to negotiate for rules that are practical and not cost prohibitive for growers, while ensuring good oversight and management of water resources.
One proposal mandates that growers along waterways with documented problems install water sampling stations at the edge of each field before drainage leaves the property.
The cost to growers of such a requirement is staggering. Hundreds or even thousands of dollars per month would be necessary to pay for water sampling and equipment, laboratory testing, and report writing.
And Regional Water Board members see agriculture needing to prepare to absorb those extra costs. Water Board member Jeffrey Young made these comments at a public meeting on March 21, 2019.
Ag has enjoyed for decades the ability to externalize a lot of costs onto the public resources, receiving water, surface waters, groundwater, soils. Now we're seeing the tension of the Water Board's effort to try to internalize some of those costs. And we're getting, this pushback. I mean, it's not to be unexpected. I kind of expect it to happen. But I am mindful of the fact that, there's been kind of free reign for as long as irrigated ag has existed. And because the problem has gotten pretty bad in some areas, the cost to correct the problems have become pretty profound.
The draft approaches released in spring 2019 could also require growers to adopt management practices with the goal of making sure any water leaving a field is virtually free of pesticides and meets water quality standards.
My concern is that we could be doing all of these BMPs and really not be moving the dial at all in terms of water quality. And I would just like some comfort that the BMPs are doing as we hope they're going to do and expect that they're going to do.
Another regulatory change already on the books by another state agency is the phasing out of an insecticide once widely used on Central Coast vegetables to control problem pests. The California Department of Pesticide Regulation, or DPR, announced in May that chlorpyrifos, or Lorsban, one of its commercial names, can no longer be sold after January 2021.
This means one less tool for the fight against destructive pests in vegetables, fruits, and nuts throughout California. DPR is the state agency that enforces pesticide rules that originate at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, or EPA. DPR also has the authority to develop regulations specifically for California conditions. The mission of DPR is to protect human health and the environment in California. It is the lead agency in the state for regulating the registration, distribution, sale, and the use of pesticides.
Before any pesticide can be applied to a crop, it must first be approved by EPA at the federal level and then DPR for use in California. This requires the careful review by EPA and DPR of hundreds of scientific studies conducted according to EPA guidelines to ensure the safe use of these products when used according to the label. This approval comes with a product label that covers specific requirements for everything from the personal protective equipment to field re-entry intervals after treatments and the type of signs to be posted on field edges. The label also describes mixing and loading procedures, application directions, and precautions when handling and storing containers. The label is the law governing everything about that pesticide.
In addition to the Regional Water Board, DPR is charged with identifying the agricultural sources of pesticides in surface water.
DPR also has to understand how pesticides potentially move from treated fields into waterways and develop product use mitigations to prevent that from happening. The outcome of this investigation can lead to more restrictions on how that pesticide is applied near waterways.
Good morning. I'm with the County Agriculture Commissioner's Office, and we received a call regarding a potential spray drift.
While you may never see an official from EPA or DPR in the fields, there is a good chance you'll see an inspector working for the County Agricultural Commissioner. Each county in California has an agricultural commissioner who is responsible for enforcing pesticide laws and regulations for farms and cities alike. These local officials inspect farms and, in particular, check to make sure that pesticides are handled, stored, and applied according to the product label.
An inspector from the County Agricultural Commissioner has the authority to stop a pesticide application in the field to make sure the driver is wearing the proper clothing, mask, or gloves for the product being applied. County inspectors like to see treatments like this, where the application stays on the crop and no spray drift leaves the site. But they will act if spray drift leaves a field treated near sensitive sites, such as highways, schools, and waterways. Some pesticide labels state the distance that must be maintained between a treated field and a sensitive site. For some products, this buffer zone can be anywhere from 25 feet to 150 feet from a treated site. A county agricultural commissioner can issue a citation that may carry a fine against a grower for things like an applicator wearing improper personal protective equipment, or when an application is made during high winds causing spray drift to enter a sensitive site. Inspectors find these infractions either through their own observations or from complaints by neighbors, motorists, or anyone who spots what they see as unusual activities surrounding pesticide applications. This authority comes from the Ag Commissioner's role as enforcer of the DPR regulations, in particular the product label.
So where does the Regional Water Board authority originate?
At the state level, California has 9 regional water boards. They are charged with protecting water quality by enforcing the Porter-Cologne Water Quality Control Act passed by the legislature back in 1969. This act is implemented by the California Water Code. The Central Coast Regional Water Board is responsible for our region.
There are 7 Regional Water Board members on the Central Coast who are appointed by the governor.
Water boards work to make sure even small amounts of pesticides stay out of rivers, streams, and ditches. New rules are being debated that will determine how agriculture will be regulated by the Water Board as it works to fulfill its mandate.
When will the new rules go into effect? The final public hearing is expected sometime in the year 2020 or 2021. In spring 2019, Water Board member Young questioned agricultural representatives on what should be included in those new regulations.
Let me ask you about edge of field sampling. Why not have, at some point, if that would become required, not just a sample that happens once in a while, but if it does reach that point that the Water Board thinks that that would be appropriate, that there be a more concerted effort with a ranch, that there be multiple points and multiple sampling over time to get a broader picture of whether this, a particular point in time is indicative of a more holistic contribution from a ranch.
Comments such as these are likely to be reflected in a draft order expected to be released in late 2019. Then the really intense discussions are expected to begin.
Ideas from agricultural groups and environmental advocates will be combined with those board recommendations, then ultimately become regulations that will impact how crops are grown for years to come.